Whitmer, Executive Order 2020-35, that focuses on the suspension of in-school learning for K through 12 for the remainder of the school year. For today's discussion, we have Dr. Kimberly Leverett. She is the head executive director of our Education and Training Department for the Flint and Genesee Chamber of Commerce. We also are excited about Dr. Lisa Hagel joining us today. She's the superintendent of the GISD, and today we should also be joined by State Representative Cheryl Kennedy. She is she's on the committee for Education and Appropriations at the state of Michigan on that subcommittee. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Kimberly Leverett to start today's conversation.
Thank you, Adrian. Good afternoon, Dr. Hagel, and thank you for taking time to talk with the community about Executive Order 2020-35 as we're in the midst of COVID-19 and ensuring the safety and well-being of everyone in the state of Michigan. Governor Whitmer has issued this order to ensure the education of our K-12 students continues as fully and effectively as possible. So can you talk, Dr. Hagel, about the suspension of in-person K-12 instruction for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year, including sports and other in-person extracurricular activities?
I sure can. Thank you, Dr. Leverett. So it is absolutely no surprise that children are home. It's the safest place that they can be right now, and I'm sure it was a very difficult decision for our governor. But what the governor has ordered is for education to continue. It'll just continue very differently. And so what districts are doing right now, they're doing what is called a continuity of learning plan. So children will be learning from a distance, and it'll look a little differently for every school district in Michigan. And it's being developed for pre-K, so children in GSRP or 4-year-old preschool through 12th grade. And every district, depending on what children have, whether they have a Chromebook, a laptop, a desktop computer, some children might be using their phones from high school or middle school students. Some might not. They might be having packets or other textbooks. And teachers will be contacting them, some on a daily basis, some multiple times a week. So they'll be learning differently each week. Teachers will be contacting parents, and they'll be going through different instructional modes, depending on which district that they're in. So learning will look differently, but it will continue for students in all grades and all content areas. Some will be project-based, some will be virtual learning through videos, different kind of instructional methods. Each of it will be individualized based on how much time a family can give, because we know in some situations both parents are still working. Some are still working from home, and we have to be patient with that. I mean, in every different situation, the school has to take into consideration what reality would look like in that home. So there's no hard and fast rule to the plans that the districts are developing. Per se, it's not a 6.5-hour day for a child anymore. All of the rules that used to be in place that we knew, they're waived in those plans. So it looks very different based on where a child lives, where a child goes to school, how old they are. It doesn't matter if you're in an urban setting, a rural setting, a suburban setting. It looks very different based on the skills, the technology, everything that a child would have to offer or a school district has to offer. So it's going to be a very creative plan based on the age of the child, the school district that they attend, and what the teachers, the administrators, the school board, and the pupil can put into place for each and every child. As far as sports, unfortunately, the spring sports for students under MHSAA rules that whole season has been canceled. And so there will not be any junior high or high school sports occurring this spring for young people.
Thank you, Dr. Abel. And so it's important for all of us to be reminded of how committed we are to education in the state of Michigan, even in the midst of this pandemic that we're all experiencing. This is our new normal, but I appreciate your comments, Dr. Hagel, just in terms of ensuring that learning will continue for our pre-K through 12th grade Michigan students. So thank you very much for that. And now I'm just briefly turn it back over to Adrian so that he can bring Representative Kennedy on.
Thank you, Dr. Leverett. I just wanted to welcome again State Representative Cheryl Kennedy to the call. Again, as I mentioned, State Representative Kennedy also sits on the subcommittee for appropriations and education. So Representative Kennedy, we just wanted to thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us for today's call. Oh, I think you got to take it off of mute, Rep. Kennedy. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, happy to do it, and sorry for the technical difficulties.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Leverett.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Representative Kennedy. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Great.
It's good to see Lisa as well.
Yes.
You too, Representative.
So happy to have you join us, Representative Kennedy. As you know, we are talking this afternoon about the overall education plan and the suspension of in-person K-12 instruction for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. And we were talking about what that means for the state of Michigan and what that means for our community. Can you add or talk about what that means from your perspective, Representative Kennedy?
Sure. So one of the things that we're talking about at the legislative side is, first of all, we had to work with the governor closely, as I know the superintendents and the state, our state superintendent, Dr. Rice, worked very closely together to create a plan of how we were going to manage this year. But now that that has been essentially done, we still have a lot of other things to that we're working on for this year. Everything from early childhood education to making sure that our special education populations are that we're following the law, that we're waiting for guidance from the federal government regarding how we should be handling IEPs and how we should what we should be doing. And the big picture is that we should be giving our best faith effort to meet the needs of every child, especially our children special needs. And then we know as a state that we are going to have to provide compensatory services for all of our children, our special education population, but also our Title I children, our kids that were already struggling with reading and math and may have been below grade level. And we always have a little summer slide. And of course, having this much time away from the classroom is going to be significant. So what we're looking at legislatively is how are we going to make sure that we're financially in a place that we can provide those compensatory services, which are always expensive. And yet at the same time, we also know that we're going to be facing shortfalls because our school system is funded based on a sales tax model, and people aren't going out for dinner. They're not going to the movies, all of those things that we normally charge sales tax. We're simply not getting that revenue right now. The federal government's plan does have some money built into it, quite a bit actually, that Michigan will be a beneficiary of, that will help with some of those holes in education, specifically with Title I and special education. But we will not know until we're through this if that will be enough on its own or if we are going to have to prioritize in other ways. But what we do know is that those services are required by law, that they're a civil right. And so first and foremost, we have to make sure that we're taking care of all of our students And so hopefully this will be a conversation to continue about a weighted model, which is something that currently our current leadership in the House and Senate have been reluctant to take on the weighted model, which is recommended by research. But we're thinking that this may be, unfortunately, this terrible situation we find ourselves in may force us to really look at the weighted model when we're funding schools in the future. So just know that we, as a legislature, are already looking forward to not just how do we close this year and make sure that kids do have that continuity of learning opportunity, but also how do we start up the next year and make sure that we have the resources available to do it well and do everything we can to meet kids where they are when they return to us in the fall or even early or even late summer, depending on the district, and we get kids what they need.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So it's going to be important for us as a state, as a community, to really be flexible, to stay the course, to ensure that parents are staying connected with the school so that their students, as you said so eloquently, State Representative Kennedy, to make sure that our students get the education that they need. It may be different because of the situation that we're in, but we want to make sure that our students are afforded all of the opportunities given the platform that we can to be able to meet their needs, whether we're talking about our special education students, our students in a traditional classroom, or even our gifted and talented students. We just want to make sure that we are providing everything that we can for our learners. So I appreciate you for that.
And I would just like to say one more thing, because my husband's a teacher, so I'm also on the front lines of observing he and his staff members and colleagues going through this transition themselves. And our teachers and administrators, building administrators, are working so hard to make this work for their students. They've worked straight through their traditional spring break that they were supposed to have off, and have just been doing everything they can to make sure that they stay connected to their students and in every way, whether it's distributing meals or just sending out those encouraging emails. So they've put so much time and effort into this. I really am encouraging parents to take advantage of what they're providing to them and, really it helped prop those teachers up a little bit too by actually logging on to those websites and actually, they feel like it's worth it when they see that their students are actually logging on and participating in those activities. And it helps to keep them motivated as well. So just a little shout out to the teachers and administrators for their work.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So I want to move on and ask you about, are there any specific guidelines in the plan for state-approved non-public schools and parents and guardians homeschooling students that you would encourage?
Are you speaking to me?
Dr. Hagel, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You're asking about the non-public?
Yes, and homeschooling. Are there any provisions in the plan for those parents and that population that you would?
I don't work very, very often with the non-public or homeschooled students,
Okay.
but I wouldn't say any of the guidelines that are in the plan aren't important for those entities either. I mean, they need to stay as connected with those students that they serve as the public schools. I mean, I would say all the very same things we're focusing on.
Yes.
I'm sure they're focusing on as well.
Great. Okay, so can we move? And I would also like to talk about what are some of the benefits of continuing to provide mental health support and nutrition for our students during this time?
I can speak to some of that.
Okay.
So in areas like Genesee County, schools are often the most important place for students, for their social emotional wellness, the stability for students. I mean, we provide just such a wealth of opportunity for young people. It's a place that they can predict what's always going to happen. It's safe. We provide, a warm shelter with people who are always predictable, who love them, who take care of them, who feed them. We just wrap ourselves around those young people every day. And for the most part, we love all those kids, and they know that. And so still focusing on the social emotional whole child aspect of educating students is so important right now. So focusing on relationships in these continuous learning plans is a very important aspect of what the schools are doing right now. I think it's one of the most important parts of the plan. And so in every plan that a district is writing, maintaining the relationships and the connections with the students and the family unit as a whole is critically important. Reaching out, as Representative Kennedy said, with emails, with postcards, with phone calls, just maintaining the strong relationships. In our county, we have 8 social workers who are going to open up a hotline next week, just for people who, whether it's parents, young kids, middle school kids, high school kids, who just want to call someone and talk to them.
Right.
So that social emotional wellness, as much as we possibly can provide support for it, is taken care of, because until we meet the basic needs, we know that children just have a hard time learning. And so it is critically important to nurture and take care of the relationships within the plans and with children and adults in Genesee County.
Great.
And I'll say that legislatively, we were just starting to really create a system,
Yes.
and we put a lot of money, like $30 million, into a statewide system that we were just starting to develop. How is this going to work? That helped us to capture federal dollars for the purpose of social emotional health and mental health. And I've been working really closely with our ISD on that plan locally and how that was going to work, and trying to connect them with resources as much as possible. And now everything's kind of come to a halt. So it's unfortunate, because we were really starting to see huge gains as far as what that system would look like in reaching down to the school level, so that not only students but their families had access to social work and mental health support. And that school was the hub of that. The school was the hub of that community. The school was the hub of that service. So, now that we're not meeting in the building, it's just even more important that we still virtually maintain that sense of school is still the hub. And I know that's why, when I spoke to Dr. Rice, our state superintendent, about, he was very clear that he did not want to send a message that school was ending, that school had ended. He wanted to send a clear message that no, those relationships are still there, and that school, we're going to have a continuation of learning. It may be different, and it won't take the place of being in the building, but it didn't end. It's just going to look very different. Also, it's important to recognize that families are under a tremendous amount of stress right now, and we have seen the numbers go up in domestic violence and things like that we're just it's where we are, and some people were already fragile before we had this additional stress. And so more than ever, I'm so thrilled to hear that you're setting up that hotline, Lisa, because it's just really important. And even for our special ed parents, some of our special ed parents have children who are emotionally impaired, or suffer from a level of autism where the children become violent, and it's not their fault, it's their disability. And yet when those children were at school, it gave the parents a little bit of break, so then when the students came home, they could manage them. And now, not only are they with those children 24 hours a day, but they may not have the toolbox in place for managing that child's behavioral issues for that period of time. So that's also really important, that we continue to provide that social work support for the parents of students that maybe physically demanding, as well as just, all of us as parents, we struggle a little bit. But for some of our parents, it's a very different struggle, and it's a real struggle, and an emotional one. So I'm thrilled to hear that you're setting up that hotline.
That was made possible by you. That's that 31N money
Oh,
that
that's
you
great.
have
Oh, that's
allocated.
great.
Yes.
Good to hear.
Mhm.
Great. So we all know how important community partners are in educating our youth, and considering the position that we're in, we know that it's going to take a village to help get us through this. So what role do you see community partners playing in supporting this plan? Here at the Flint and Genesee Chamber of Commerce, of course, we have several programs in education and training, and one of those that we come closely with is around our Youth Quest, our after-school programming, and a lot of things that you mentioned, Dr. Hagel, in terms of staying connected and keeping that relationship with our students and with our parents is exactly what we're doing. Sending out those postcards, making those personal plans, for our students, providing school supplies and all of those things so that we can stay as connected to our students during this time as we can. What do you see as being vital in terms of community partners to help us with this?
I think, you're hitting it on the head, is just to keep those connections between the partners and the schools open. Our communication is critical, so we don't forget that those connections are there. And triangularly, then making those connections with the community partners and the parents, so those are still open.
Yes.
It is very difficult right now. We have about 1,700 students in the county that are in a CTE program, preparing for a certification, a licensure in a business degree or a certification degree that those young people were so hoping to finish that in just a few weeks from now. So we are going to need a business partner to probably help us complete that, because we're not going to let those young kids go. We're going to finish that in the summer. We're going to bring those kids back because it's so important to them that in just a few weeks, just a little bit of push, and we can finish that with those kids. So we'll probably taking you up on that, Dr. Leverett.
Absolutely.
And those business partners, because we're not going to let those kids go.
Great.
And I know they're not going to give up on that dream here in just a few weeks. It's just too important. We've got, they're almost to that finish line, and it was so important to them that we're going to push them over the edge.
That's great.
And then send them off to a dream job.
Wonderful.
So we'll be calling upon a lot of community partners here shortly, as soon as we can see people once again. So we'll take you up on that.
And I think it's important to recognize too. I know I was talking to one of my CLIO groups that are putting together a fund of money to help people who are struggling, or businesses that may need some support. And right now, people are applying for their unemployment, they're applying for their business loans, they're applying for their SNAP benefits. And although it's slow because our system is pretty stretched right now, people have confidence that eventually they're going to have those benefits. But when we are on the other side of this COVID crisis, it's not like we're going to turn on a switch and everyone's going to go back to work and everything's going to return to normal. We're still going to have a bridge on the other side once we feel like it is safe to go out of our homes again. And I think we're going to re-enter our community somewhat in stages. And there may be gaps at that side of this process as well. And so our community partners who are so anxious and in the position to do something right now are reaching out and saying, what can I do? What can I do? And often I'm saying, hold on. Right now we've got a lot of support for people, but on the other side of this, there may be less. So it's just important to recognize, even if our stay-at-home order were to end on May 1st, if we were all able to go back and get back into our jobs by the middle of May, that this the legacy of this situation is going to last probably a full fiscal year. So it's just we aren't just building the plane as we fly it now until we get through the crisis. We're going to be building that plane really through the next fiscal year until we have a better sense of what the actual economic reality is, what the educational reality is, and we'll be gathering that data, and then we'll be making our decisions, hopefully based on what our most pressing needs are. And so there's going to be all kinds of opportunity for community partnership. I think most importantly is that we're communicating with each other, and I think the chamber provides a great place for that communication to happen. Both the chamber and the school systems are two great places to make sure that we can send information to you and you can disseminate it, and
Yes.
vice versa. So just so important that we keep communicating so we have a full complement in our toolbox when it comes to getting back on track.
Great. Thank you. This next question, Dr. Hagel, can you tell us, is there a timeline for or an estimated date when districts would begin implementation of the plans?
Sure. So the earliest that a district could turn their plan in for approval was yesterday, but they
Okay.
have to be fully implemented no later than April 28th. And so the process would look like the districts turn their plans into the ISD. The ISD begins reading them for all of the required components. Once all the required components are complete, then I approve those plans and submit those to the Michigan Department of Education and the Michigan State Treasury. Once those are submitted there, the district is given an approval to implement. So they could begin implementation as early as tomorrow, let's say, and then start all of their work. I'm sure the communities will start feeling like a new sense of, okay, school is back on, if you will. Learning at a distance is what we'd like to call that.
Right.
And the students they'll feel like that sense of their teachers are there. I'm sure most children can feel like Representative Kennedy's husband. He's not gone away. He's still there for them. And a lot of students would wish he would go away, right? But he's not going away.
Nope, we keep coming back.
So, Dr. Hagel,
the latest that they could implement would be the 28th of April, but you really won't see any districts waiting that long. No. They want to get started. They want to implement. If they wait any longer than that, they would have to make up days into the school year, and that they really won't want to make up any days further into June than they already are.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. And can we talk just a moment about, we know how impacts are. Is there any assessment going to be built into the plans that the districts have to submit? And then what will our plan for assessments look like moving forward as we start talking about rebuilding and reintroducing for the following school year?
Sure. So there's a lot of different kinds of assessments, if you will.
Right.
The assessments, like testing, state standardized testing has been waived. So like the juniors who typically go through state testing like M-STEP or the mandatory SAT, those have been waived this year for the juniors. They won't be required to take those tests. But assessments like teachers requiring students take a test for a grade, they may get a test that's been sent home, but those would be more tested like what's called formative assessments, where they're going to get some feedback from the teacher. They probably, unless it's up to the administrator of the building and the superintendent on what kind of grading practices that they'll see that they can see things from a pass-fail to just getting feedback. Like, you really need to work more on these kinds of standards. You're weak in this. You're not ready in this area for next year. We're going to have to really work more on this for 11th grade or 10th grade or 7th grade. They're going to get more feedback. Some courses, some teachers will provide grades based on what the principals are deciding. So the administrator of the buildings have full discretion to decide that, whether it's letter grades, percentages, or pass fail, credit, no credit. So testing and assessments are going to look different between buildings, between teachers, between districts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And has there been any conversation in terms of the seniors and what the expectation is for the students' diplomas, their final exams, all of those, their grades, their credits? How will that look? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversation about that, Dr. Leverett. So the executive order has language in there that's called do no harm. So on March 11th, where a senior was on March 11th, that is basically where a senior will stay as far as their grades. They can do better. So a senior can improve their grades, which is a wonderful opportunity. If you're a senior, you can improve where you are from March 11th going forward. You can improve your grade point average. You can improve your letter grades. If you were failing on March 11th, every senior, if you have an E, you have an opportunity to improve that grade by a project, by demonstration, by an assessment, by in some way, shape, or form, the district, the teacher has to give you an opportunity to show that you can be proficient in that subject. And that would allow you to get a credit and meet graduation requirements if you are a senior. So the district would take their graduation requirements, and every district in the state kind of differs in their graduation requirements for to earn a diploma. So what they're going to do is they'll move all their kids forward like they've earned all the credits for this semester based on passing grade, minus civics. If you you don't have to earn a civics credit for this semester, that has been waived. That's a graduation requirement for a senior, except if you were in it for this semester, you don't need to take that. And they would roll all the seniors forward like they have earned this semester's credits if they've passed their classes. And those students will earn this semester's credits. And then the graduation ceremonies, depending on what the district decides. There's a lot of different versions of graduations being discussed, from a virtual graduation to graduations occurring in July, graduations occurring in August, or just waiting to see what the governor decides for graduations occurring in really late June if something was going to be lifted. So I haven't really heard of any district not having any sort of graduation and removing that, but there's lots of different conversations going on now about graduations and what that would look like.
And proms are a big deal.
Too. Lots of July proms coming out, so there will be no cold girls. Let's say that.
Okay, great. And where can I get access to the plan once they are submitted and approved? Will they be posted to districts' web pages, or how will that work?
Representative Kennedy, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, part of the law is that it has to be a transparent process, and so from what I understand, most districts will be posting them to their web page. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so parents who are interested will be able to find it. Just like now we have the transparency reporting. It's a little shape of Michigan. You click on that and you can find out all kinds of data about your school. This will be very similar to that, part of that transparency reporting.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this has been a great conversation, and I just wanted each of you to have a moment to just talk to, if you could give a message to the community about where we're headed, with overall some words of encouragement about where we're headed with our education and our plan and what we plan to do to stick with the community to make sure that we are communicating and to make sure, as I stated in the introduction, that we are giving our pre-K through 12th grade students and fully and effective education as we possibly can. I'll start with you, State Representative Kennedy.
Well, I think most importantly is to stay connected and know that there is an administrator on the other side of that phone if you were to call, that there is not a situation that your family is facing that your schools aren't ready to help you through. And that most importantly is stay connected. You've got a whole group of adults who are there not just to support our students, but to support the whole families. It's what we've always done. And it's done through a distance and it's done virtually, but the mission hasn't changed. So this is, it's a tough time for everyone. It's a historical time. It's a time that we're going to be talking to our grandchildren and great grandchildren about what we did during this time as a family. And so, don't be discouraged. Take those walks. How rare is it that we get to spend a month or more with our families uninterrupted for the most part, except for these virtual meetings that we have. But really, what an opportunity. So try to keep the positive glass half full mentality and know that we're all in it together, and you're not alone. You've got your schools, you have your state representative, whether it's me or whomever represents you, that's here to help you get through it. And we will get through it together. We've got a great system, got good people.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Dr. Hagel?
And what I would like to share is we all realize in the education community the amount that we're asking families to take on right now. And all we're asking is that you do the best you can and you be patient with the children and be patient with yourself and just do the best you can with what you have, with the amount of time you have, with the equipment that you have. And don't put undue pressure on yourself or your kids or expectations that are just too high. Just do the best you can with what you have, and know that we are here to support you, and we will do the best that we can as well. And if you have questions, please reach back out to your schools. This is a situation that everybody will do the very best they can with, but it is definitely an unprecedented situation that we all are in it together, as Representative Kennedy said, and that there is nothing that is more important than just taking care of the children at this time. And there's no expectation that we all have to strive to get 150% on anything. It is more important that we make it through the situation, still loving one another and just doing the best that we can to take care of each other. And coming through this with a smile on our face, and that we come back in the fall ready to learn together. And if we need something, we reach out to each other and ask for support and assistance.
Great. Thank you two so much. And I believe at this point, we're going to turn it back over to Stephen. But I do want to say, Representative Kennedy and Dr. Hagel, it's always a pleasure to speak with both of you because your passion and your purpose really have come through this afternoon. And so I hope that we can continue this conversation as we go along through this together. As you said, our mission has not changed. We are here to educate our children. And so I so appreciate this conversation with you guys this afternoon. It has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. We do have a few questions that I'd like to share with our panel. The first one, I'm not familiar with this, but are there any plans to change the Act 18? Would either of you like to speak to that?
And Steve, we're still planning on a hearing with an administrative law judge later in the, I don't know, later in the year. We have to change the date because of the COVID-19 emergency. So we're still waiting for the judge to kind of establish the hearing dates.
Next question. Will all high school students have the opportunity to improve their GPAs or just seniors?
All high school students.
Perfect. Let's see. Did districts have to consider the social emotional needs of students in the plans submitted?
That is a requirement of the continuity plan, is that the social emotional needs of all high school students, all students for that matter, pre-K through 12th grade, be taken into consideration and is a part of every district's plan for every teacher, every family, every student.
Thank you. Can Representative Kennedy restate the website to check status of the districts?
So it will be your district's website, and they will have a link of their plan. So it'll be different for every district. But if you just go to your district's website, they will have a link on their page that will you can go and actually read their plan.
Thank you. Let's see. As a grandparent, how do I see the district expectation of my granddaughter at Goodrich? That's what school she goes to.
Well, they can see the district's plan on the Goodrich's website. Depending on what grade the granddaughter is in, they can look at, there's an elementary section, a middle school section, or a high school section for the plan. And then they can read that portion of the plan. They can always contact the administrator of the school as well to learn more about the plan.
And their teachers will be reaching out as well in
Yes.
communication, regular communication. That's a part of this. So, I really encourage the parents and guardians of these kids to be reaching out to the teacher, just like they would if that teacher was still in the classroom, and saying, are we doing it? If you need that extra, support to make sure you feel like you're doing right by your child, reach out to the teacher and saying, this is what I can do. And is that all right? Or I need more help. Can you provide me more resources? That teacher is still the first line. They're the person working, directly with the parents. So please communicate with their teachers.
Thank you. Question regarding special education. Students with IEPs, how will those be accommodated?
Can I speak to that just a little bit, Lisa?
Sure.
If you don't mind. So
No.
I'm a part of a whole consortium of leaders from the education community, legislative community, special ed advocate community. And we actually had a 2-hour meeting yesterday talking specifically about this issue. And right now, the guidance is that we shouldn't be changing IEPs, that right now the guidance is that IEPs should stand and we should be giving our best faith effort to meet the needs of those children. But you might have a child who's on an IEP that gets very little support through the general ed setting, and then you have students that receive a lot of support, as I was mentioning before. And so it really is an individual situation depending on the child. How do you do occupational therapy and physical therapy when you can't sit in the same room as the child? Those are the issues that we're facing. And that's why those compensatory services, once this is over, are going to be so important, because we have to do our best to meet the needs of the IEP, meet the requirements of the IEP now, but we know that we won't be able to do everything. And so once it's safe to be in a room together, again, we know that we're going to have to, as a state, provide extra funding and extra support. And honestly, manpower we already have a shortage of teachers and a shortage of special education teachers in the state. So making sure while we're providing compensatory services, that means above and beyond what they normally get. So just even making sure we have the personnel to support those compensatory services are going to be very, very important. So as of right now, the guidance is, but we are still waiting for more guidance from the federal government. But right now, the guidance is we're not to be making alterations to the IEPs, but with the understanding that we will have to provide some compensatory services once this is over. I'm sure Lisa can speak to that even more than that.
No, that's about where we are. Each district is developing what's called a contingency plan, which meets every child with an IEP to the best of their ability. And, you know, they'll go through the IEPs and develop a plan that meets each individual student to the very best that they can, trying to reach their goals and objectives with what to the very best that they can for that child. But as Representative Kennedy said, it is difficult to do occupational therapy and physical therapy, you know, through virtual education. So we will have compensatory time to make up to some of those children once we're back face to face.
Thank you both. Questions regarding the plans. When should they be available and accessible for people to view?
As soon as they're approved, sometime between today and April 28th on the district's websites.
Okay. Two more questions I see here. How do you ensure the fairness of all students learning across the board? Uh-oh.
Well, no, the districts, I mean, the plans will try to be as equitable as possible from student to student, but I don't know if there's any possible way to measure fairness between a district to a district. Some districts do provide, you know, a laptop or a Chromebook or an iPad to every single student in the district, and some districts just don't do that. So if you would perceive that to be fair or not fair, that's just up to the district and how they choose to spend their dollars. Other districts would rather spend their dollars in a different way. So, but they may reach out and do different, you know, education a different way to their students. So they will reach every child to the best of their ability in a different way. You know, as long as they have all the components of the plan in place, then they'll begin their education.
Here we go. Let me add the representative back. The last question I see here, it's not a question, but rather a statement. Some parents aren't equipped to do what is required of their IEP or 504. Would either of you like to comment on that?
Right. I would agree with that. Some parents can't meet the need of the 504 or the IEP. They're not occupational therapists or speech and language pathologists. Those are some of the services that will need to be made up at a later time to students. So what they'll do is that, like, a teacher consultant or a speech and language pathologist will work with the parent just to teach them maybe basic skills that they could work with the child at home, you know, to work towards goals and objectives, but they won't be able to meet it as efficiently as what a speech and language or occupational therapist could do themselves. We'll just do the best that they can with what we have at that time.
It's about a best faith effort.
That's right.
And we just can't say that enough. This is not about perfection. This is about doing the best with what we have, with every good intention, and just being comfortable in that space until we get through this.
This will be our last. I'm going to put them together as one, but I'm seeing some questions regarding remote learning, equipment, availability of equipment, funding for that equipment, and then how will teachers leverage things like Google Classroom or other virtual solutions? Could you speak to how that might be handled in the classroom?
As far as how will districts purchase remote learning equipment?
If let me read the one. Is there any funding for students who don't have a computer or laptop at home? And then the other part was, will teachers do something like Google Classroom or more virtual, or is that a district by district decision?
It is a district by district decision. Some districts are allocating additional dollars from other like line items, like maybe they're not spending as much right now on other district supplies or materials, so they're redistributing that money to buy laptops for students. That's a district by district decision. And so some districts are using Google Classroom. Some districts are using Zoom. Some, it's a district by district decision.
Okay. Representative Kennedy, anything you'd like to add on that one?
Just that I applaud the creativity of our districts in trying to get kids connected. One of the other big issues that when I talked to State Superintendent Rice, one of his biggest concerns was the inequity of resources across our state, and even in Genesee County. If you live in a more rural area, you may not have connectivity. Part of my district, we have teachers and students that simply don't have connectivity because of the broadband access in the area, and it's not even a financial issue, it's just access to broadband. And so I just can't say enough about the creativity of our districts and really trying to leverage resources, whether it's getting a hotspot into that home, the remote connecting devices that are more along the lines of connecting to your cell phone. And some folks are putting up making broadband accessible in their school parking lots, so that if someone drove to their school parking lot, they wouldn't have to get out of their car, but they would have accessibility to the broadband if they wanted to get on their laptop and use that. And those are things that I get phone calls about as a representative saying, is this legal? Is this something that's allowed? And I ask the governor's office or the attorney general's office and give them guidance as best as I can. But I just can't say enough about the creativity that our superintendents and administrators have gone through to really try to make sure every single child has access to not just connectivity and good quality learning, because we could take the easy way out. And I'm telling you, nobody's taking the easy way out on the administrative and teaching side. They really want to give the best quality effort that they can. And I've just been so impressed with the creativity and problem solving that's gone around this.
Those are all the questions that we have. Thank you both. And I'll give it to Adrian to close us out.
Yeah, no, I won't labor before you too much longer. I just want to thank all the participants, Dr. Kimberly Leverett from the Chamber, Dr. Lisa Hago from the GISD, and State Representative Cheryl Kennedy for today's conversation. This will be an ongoing conversation that we're committed to at the Chamber. So we hope to maybe have you back.
Thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much for helping us get the word out.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Thank you. All right.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.